So if you have a Derech Hashem, or use the name in addition on page 293, which is part 2, chapter 5, section 5. And the section that we're doing, what we've been discussing, is Hashgacha, how Hashem interacts with the world. And we talked about how specifically he does that. For example, why do people suffer? What is the purpose of suffering? Why do some people have an easy life? Some people have a more difficult life? Why do the righteous sometimes suffer and the wicked sometimes prosper? These are things that we discussed in the previous chapters. And most recently we discussed, so that's how Hashem interacts. Then after that we talked about the mechanics of how Hashem interacts with the world. We might have thought that it's just the physical world and God, and that's it, nothing in between. But we learned that that's not the case. There are actually many spiritual worlds between our physical world and Hashem, so to say. And the way God created the world is that there's a system, a spiritual system, where He provides Shefa, His abundance. He reveals Himself to some level. In fact, Rabbi Naaman actually didn't translate the word Shefa, but He gets close to the world in some way, and then good things happen, and He conceals Himself, and then bad things happen. And we also learned about the Malachim, that there's angels that Hashem put in charge of different things. And we said, though, that doesn't mean that the angels have any free will or that they have any independent power. All of their power comes through Hashem, and really they're just like a funnel. Everything is coming from Hashem, and just these angels and other spiritual worlds, they work as the system that God created to carry out those decrees that He wants to affect the world. So we're just finishing up with that, and we'll see if we have time. We'll start talking about miracles, the purpose of miracles, somewhat, and how they operate to some degree. But the Ramchal continues. Again, this is Beis Hey Hey Ve'ulam Hu Yisbarach Shemo Mashgif Alakol. God watches over everything. Elyonim v'tachtonim, the upper worlds and the lower world. So we have our low physical world, and then above that there are many, many spiritual worlds and many, many higher levels. And all of that is under Hashem's direction. Shoshim Vanfeim, all of the roots and all of the branches. Right, so the way it works is that you have, Hashem makes a decree, and then it goes down to the lower spiritual worlds, and then beyond that, below that, and until the physical world. So God is watching over this entire process. And His intent is that there should be total, for the good, total complete, shleimus, total completeness. And with that He orchestrates, He controls, He directs all of creation. It has different details, and according to how each one should be, that these should be this certain group should be pushed aside, or these people should be brought close. These people should be refined through suffering, and these people should rest. Each one according to what is befitting to come to him, in order that the creation gets to shleimus, gets to completeness. So now there's something which the Ramchal here is just kind of mentioning in passing, but it's a very deep idea which he discusses at length in other places, specifically in Das Tunos. He discusses this a lot. There are two ways in general that Hashem deals with the world. One is Hanhagas HaMishpat, and one is Hanhagas HaYichud. So Hanhagas HaMishpat means that a person does a mitzvah, he does something he's supposed to do, he gets rewarded. He does a sin, he does an avera, he gets punished. That is Hanhagas HaMishpat, reward and punishment. That is the way that one way that God deals with the world. Now there's another way how God also deals with the world. Now we might have thought that God puts us in the world, in these physical bodies, to see how many mitzvahs we do and how many averas, and after we die, we go up in front of God, we go to heaven, and He says, okay, you got X amount of mitzvahs, X amount of sins, all right, you made it into heaven, good for you. And that's it. This is like a video game where we just try to accrue as many mitzvahs as possible. But that is actually not how God created the world. There's another aspect. the entire world is being directed to shleimus, to completion. The way the Ramchal learns, and many others learn, is that the world that we are in now, after the Messiah comes, after Mashiach comes, there will be a resurrection of the dead, and this world as we know it will be destroyed, and it will be recreated, and that will be Olam Haba, the world to come. And that's where humanity, those people that deserve it, will get their reward by being close to Hashem. Now, that means the entire world as is now is directed to a final purpose. So it's not just that each individual is getting rewarded and punished for his deeds as an individual, but the world in itself, the entire world as a whole, is going towards this final goal of perfection. Now, that's called Hanhagas HaYichud. Hanhagas HaYichud means God is pushing the world towards that goal. Now, when will that happen? Part of that is, the first step in the process is Mashiach coming, and that happens when the entire world, when there's a recognition, and when Mashiach comes, there will be a recognition that God is one. People will realize that there's no other force in the world besides Hashem, and all of the things that they put their hope and their desires into, and all of the movements that existed to perfect humanity, people will realize that they were mistaken, and that the only true thing that has any power and that is Hashem, and that people should put their efforts into serving Hashem. That's Hanhagas HaYichud. So now what if there's a conflict between these two? Not say there's a conflict, but sometimes, let's say, the Hanhagas HaYichud of God directing the goal of humanity to this final purpose, sometimes that can override the Hanhagas HaMishpat. What's an example? So God promised Abraham that his children would inherit the land of Israel. And Abraham said, "B'ma Eda, how do I know? How do I know that's going to happen?" Okay. Sorry, I just got a note. So Avram said, "How do I know that's going to happen?" Now, that was a very small mistake that Avraham made. By Avraham saying, "How do I know it's going to happen? How do I know God's promise is going to be fulfilled?" On some level, it showed a lack of trust in Hashem. Now, usually, if a person were to exhibit such a lack of trust in Hashem, which is a very small mistake, he would perhaps receive a small punishment to rectify it or whatever it is. But because of that, because of what Avraham said, the Jewish people were subjected to 210 years of slavery in Egypt. We just finished celebrating Pesach, and the Jewish people were subjected to this slavery. Why? Because of the sin of Avraham. This all happened because of Avraham saying, "B'ma Eda, how do I know that that I will inherit the land of Israel?" Why was that? The reason is because Hashem wasn't operating with his Hanhagas HaMishpat, of his operating through just reward and punishment, but it was necessary to push the world towards its final conclusion. It was necessary that the Jewish people be formed as a nation, and that had to happen when they were in servitude in Egypt, and after they would be let out of Egypt, they would get the Torah, and that would be the first step. As we learned a few weeks ago, the Jewish people are the chosen people that are tasked with following the Torah and acting the way that a human being is supposed to act, serving as an example for humanity. So an integral part of human history to push the world towards shleimus, to its total completion, was that the Jewish people had to be in slavery. So Avraham asking, "B'ma Eda, how do I know that my children will inherit the land of Israel?" Because of that small sin, independently, his children wouldn't have been punished to be slaves in Egypt, but because of the Hanhagas HaYichud that God wanted to push humanity to its final completion, they had to go down to Egypt. Now, that's one example that the Ramchal speaks about, but sometimes, we're not prophets, so we don't know why things in current events happen, for sure, but there have been Torah scholars who've suggested that one could look at the coronavirus and say, certain things that are happening now, God is pushing the world in a certain direction. There are certain things that are being readjusted because God has a goal for humanity. Now, I don't know, I'm not a person that can't suggest specifically how, but some have suggested just in general, and this is a way to perhaps view, catastrophes in human history. Well, today is actually, I think, the Holocaust Remembrance Day. It's a very sensitive topic, but with this perspective, we can start approaching, and I'm not explaining why the Holocaust happened at all. That's not what I'm coming to do. I'm just saying with this concept that we discussed, we can start approaching the Holocaust to see that God has a role, God has a goal for humanity as a whole, and for whatever reason, that had to happen to push humanity towards its ultimate purpose. You can look at how human history was affected by the Holocaust in tremendous ways, and people saw the evil of humanity and how what human beings were capable of doing, just the utter destruction that they wreaked havoc and murdered millions and millions of people, and the tragedy which happened, and people lost their trust in humanity. So perhaps whatever reason it was, but it could be that it probably is a way that God wanted to push the world towards its final purpose. Now, again, not saying specifically how, but just having that concept in mind as to why these things happened. Okay, so that was the first part. Any questions on this part so far? If you're shy, you can type them on the side. No pressure. You can do it to everybody, or you can just send it to me privately. Okay. So that was the first thing. Okay, now miracles. V'hine. Now we're on Vav. If you have the book, it's page 295. V'hine. Hu yizbarach shemo b'ratzono meshana sidrei bereishis. God can change creation. B'chol yishirtze, anytime he wants. V'os anisim v'niflos kechafzo, and he can do miracles however he desires. B'dvarim shonim, with any way he wants. Kamo sheyigzar hayos enos l'toelos habriya. According to what he sees, that's befitting for creation. According to the topic and according to the time. Now, God created nature, so obviously he can change nature anytime he wants. Now, what would be a reason that God would change nature, and why don't miracles happen all the time? So, Ramchal is going to say that, he might say to Maimar Ikrim, I don't know if we'll get to it today, but that the purpose of that God created nature in a certain way because that's the best way for his creations to act. Now, why would God change nature? So the famous Ramban at the end of Parshas Bo, we just, again, to mention Pesach again, which we just finished. I don't know if you noticed this in Judaism, but we put a lot of emphasis on the leaving of Egypt. We just actually spoke about it for a long time this evening, right? We have a mitzvah actually to remember leaving Egypt every night. We just had a whole holiday of 8 days where we ate matzah. We didn't eat any chametz, and the penalty is very severe. For eating chametz on Pesach is kares, which is one of the most severe penalties. A person's soul gets cut off from God. Very serious penalty. If a person, when we had a temple, we brought a Pesach sacrifice, the Paschal lamb, and if a person didn't offer it in the temple, his soul also would be cut off. So it's very, very serious. What is it so serious about the leaving of Egypt? So this is something that the Ramban addresses in Parshas Bo, that the purpose of leaving of Egypt, he says people used to have views about God back in the day, or atheistic, heretical views. There was a group of people that thought that God doesn't exist, and there was another group of people that thought he exists but doesn't know what's going on in the world, and there was another group of people that thought that God knew what's going on in the world but he doesn't get involved. It's not his business. So when the Jews left Egypt, humanity saw that all of those ideas, these heretical ideas, were false. God, first of all, created the world. He changed it. He did perform miracles. And also, he gets involved in human affairs. He punished the Egyptians who were wicked, who oppressed the Jews, and he saved the Jews who were righteous. So God did all of these miracles, the 10 plagues. He turned the water into blood, frogs, everything, split the sea. All of this to show that all of these heretical views are false. And since God doesn't do miracles for any person who wants, right? You often hear people say, oh, if God would do a miracle for me one time, then I don't believe in him. But that's not how it works. God doesn't do miracles for every Tom, Dick, and Harry who feels like it. But rather what Hashem did miracles at one point in human history, at the time of the leaving of Egypt, and he commanded his children to remember it every night, to have a holiday of Pesach, to the seriousness of it, to perform many, many mitzvahs that are in remembrance of it, to mention it during Kiddush and all of that. And the reason is we constantly remember the miracles of the leaving of Egypt to drive home that these ideas, the most lofty idea, the most important ideas ever expressed in human history, that there is one God, that He knows what's going on and that he's involved with our lives. He cares about what's going on in our lives. He wants us to succeed. He wants us to come close to him. And he punishes the wicked and he rewards the righteous. Okay, so I think this is a good place for me to stop. Now, if anyone wants, we have this class every week at 9:30. Leah Goldman runs it. If anyone's interested, has any questions, I'll put my email on the side. But now, we're very lucky to hear from a great Torah scholar, Rabbi Zachary Rothblatt, who's going to talk about some very exciting things. Thank you.
Thanks, David.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
David. There we go.